November 1941. The Libyan desert stretches toward the horizon, an endless landscape of sand and wind. Somewhere between Tobruk and the Egyptian frontier, a German field marshal receives a message. The paper in his hand carries the authority of the German High Command in Berlin. It contains instructions that conflict with everything he believes about military conduct. The field marshal has a decision to make, and he has very little time to make it. The man reading that document is Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. He is 50 years old. He commands the German Afrika Korps, a force of approximately 33,000 soldiers. His reputation has reached both sides of the conflict. The British call him the Desert Fox, a name given out of professional respect. He has outmaneuvered every Allied general sent against him. But this situation is not about tanks or military tactics. It is about something different. It is about the moment when a soldier must choose between an order and his own understanding of right and wrong. The German High Command, known as the WWII, issued several directives during 1941. Adolf Hitler and his military advisors had developed a new approach to the treatment of certain captured soldiers. A directive from June of that year instructed that some prisoners should not receive the protections normally granted under international agreements. By the autumn, this policy had expanded across multiple theaters of the war. The consequences of this shift would be severe for many soldiers who fell into German hands. The order that reached Rommel in November reflected this new interpretation of military law. The prisoner at the center of this story was a British soldier. His identity tags marked him as a soldier of the British Empire. Under normal military conventions, he would have been sent to a prisoner of war camp, registered with the Red Cross, and held until the end of hostilities. But the new directives from Berlin, approved by Hitler's leadership, did not treat all soldiers equally. The prisoner's religious background made him subject to different treatment according to these instructions. Rommel was now faced with a direct command that violated the traditional laws of war as he understood them. To understand the pressure Rommel faced, we must examine the command structure above him. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel served as chief of the OKW. He held the same rank as Rommel. His position gave him direct access to Adolf Hitler in the highest levels of German authority. Keitel was known for his unquestioning obedience to directives from above. Between Rommel and Hitler stood no buffer. When an order came through Keitel's office, it carried the full authority of the German state and its leader. Disobedience carried serious personal and professional risks for any commander. Rommel had developed a philosophy for conducting military operations in North Africa. He called it war without hate. The desert environment was harsh enough, he believed, without adding ideological conflict to the battlefield. His forces would fight professionally. They would take prisoners according to established military conventions. They would respect the protections offered by international agreements. And they would not carry out orders that violated these principles. This philosophy was about to be tested by a direct directive from Hitler's high command. It is important to address a common misunderstanding about Rommel. Some historical accounts have portrayed him as a secret opponent of Adolf Hitler and the German regime. The evidence does not support this view. Rommel was not a resistance figure. He was a military professional who served his country throughout the conflict. His refusal to carry out certain orders came from his understanding of military honor and professional conduct, not from political opposition to Hitler. This distinction matters when evaluating his actions and his legacy. The timing of this incident is significant. In November 1941, Hitler's policies toward captured soldiers in other theaters had already taken a harsh turn. Official communications from the German Quartermaster General's office stated that prisoners unfit for labor would not be provided with supplies. This policy led to severe outcomes for hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The contrast between conditions on the Eastern Front and the North African theater was striking. Rommel's approach stood apart from what was happening elsewhere under Hitler's directives. The prisoner's name appears differently across various historical sources. Some accounts identify him as Daniele Levy. However, intelligence historians who have examined declassified records point to a different individual, Renato Levi. Levy was not a captured corporal, but rather an intelligence operative working for British services. He ran a network that fed information to German intelligence. His work had significant impact on the North African campaign. If this identification is correct, the prisoner was not an ordinary soldier, but someone of considerable strategic value. The chain of command around Rommel included several experienced officers. His chief of staff handled operational planning. His intelligence officer assessed enemy capabilities. His adjutant managed communications and personal correspondence. Any order from the high command, originating from Hitler's leadership, would have passed through these men before reaching Rommel. Any refusal would have required their awareness and support. The historical record shows no evidence of punishment or protest directed at Rommel's staff. This suggests that his decision had the backing of his immediate circle. Consider what might have happened if Rommel had followed the directive from Berlin. The immediate outcome would have been the loss of one prisoner. But the larger consequence would have been a change in the character of the North African campaign. Word would have spread among Allied forces that capture meant a different fate for certain soldiers. This knowledge would have affected how Allied soldiers fought. Intelligence networks that relied on captured personnel might have been compromised. The entire dynamic of the campaign could have shifted toward greater severity. Rommel's decision prevented that outcome in his theater of operations. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, who headed the OKW under Adolf Hitler, held the same rank as Rommel, but exercised authority over all German armed forces. His career was marked by consistent obedience to directives from Hitler and the high command. After the conflict ended, Keitel faced judgment for his role in issuing orders that violated international law. He was found responsible for his actions. The contrast between the two field marshals could not be more stark. One man refused certain orders, the other signed and distributed them without objection. The documentary files related to Rommel's North African command are now held at the German Federal Archives in Berlin. The collection includes Rommel's personal files from December 1940 to April 1943. It includes the daily war diaries maintained by his command staff. It includes intelligence reports that shaped his strategic decisions. Historians continue to examine these files for evidence of how Rommel navigated the competing demands of obedience to Hitler and his own professional ethics. Somewhere in those archives, the full story may still be waiting. This brings us to a difficult question. Was Rommel a good man who served a difficult regime under Adolf Hitler? Or was he a complex figure whose limited acts of refusal have been magnified by history? The answer likely contains elements of both views. He refused one order. He continued to serve. He showed humanity in one instance. He remained part of a system that caused enormous suffering. These statements are all true. The tension between them is the real historical record that scholars continue to debate. The refusal to follow a problematic directive might seem like a small act. One prisoner spared, one document marked with a note and filed away. But within the context of Hitler's Germany, any act of refusal carried significance. The regime demanded total obedience. When a prominent commander pushed back, even quietly, it created a record. That record remained in Berlin, and it did not go unnoticed by the leadership. The refusal in November 1941 did not end the matter. Files have a way of following people. In Berlin, the record of Rommel's reluctance remained on file. Adolf Hitler and the German leadership watched their most famous commander with growing attention. His popularity with the German public made him difficult to confront directly. But Hitler did not forget that Rommel had pushed back against his high command's directives. The file on Rommel's desk, as historians have noted, never fully closed. Let us move forward 8 months, July 1942. Rommel's forces have advanced deep into Egypt. They have captured the port of Tobruk. His name appears on front pages around the world. The German leadership under Adolf Hitler sends a special unit to join his command. The unit is led by an SS officer named Walter Rauff. Rauff has been associated with certain technical developments related to population control. His unit has been given a specific mission in the event that Rommel's forces reach Palestine and the Nile Delta. The historical record shows that on July 13, 1942, the German High Command sent a message to Rommel announcing the deployment of this special unit. The language of the message followed patterns used in other theaters where Hitler's policies had already been implemented. On July 20, 1942, Rauff traveled to Rommel's headquarters in Tobruk. According to captured intelligence documents examined after the war, Rauff received operational instructions directly from Field Marshal Rommel. The unit was placed under the authority of Rommel's army staff. This presents a contradiction that historians continue to discuss. The same commander who refused to follow a problematic directive from Hitler's high command in 1941 was now cooperating with a special unit whose mission fell outside normal military operations. How can both statements be true? The answer lies in understanding how Hitler's command structure operated. Refusing one order did not mean refusing all cooperation. Rommel continued to serve. He continued to accept assignments from Berlin. He continued to work within the system while occasionally pushing back against specific directives. The special unit's mission was never fully carried out. Rommel's forces were stopped at the Second Battle of El Alamein in November 1942. The advance into Egypt halted. The retreat began. The unit never reached its intended area of operations. The populations that would have been affected were spared the outcomes that had been planned under Hitler's directives. But the historical record shows that the plan existed. The orders from Berlin existed, and Rommel, as the theater commander, had facilitated the unit's deployment. Let us return to the prisoner from November 1941. Whatever his true name, historical accounts agree that he survived. He was not turned over to special authorities. He was not sent to Berlin. He was sent to a standard prisoner of war facility. He received the protections normally afforded to captured soldiers under international agreements. When the conflict ended, he returned to civilian life. One person survived because one commander made a decision. In a conflict that claimed millions of lives, that single outcome carries historical weight. Throughout 1943, tensions between Rommel and Adolf Hitler increased. As the military situation worsened, Rommel became more outspoken in his criticism of how Hitler was conducting the war. He complained about strategic decisions made at the highest levels. He expressed concerns about the treatment of certain populations in areas under his command. He refused to carry out certain orders related to population transfers. Reports of his criticism made their way back to Hitler's headquarters. The file on Rommel's desk grew thicker. By July 1944, the situation had reached a critical point. A group of German officers had attempted to remove Adolf Hitler from power through violent means. The attempt failed. Hitler survived. In the aftermath, investigations were launched across the military. Rommel's name appeared in some of the information gathered during these investigations. He was given a choice. He could face a public proceeding that would have consequences for his family, or he could accept a different outcome. On October 14, 1944, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel put on his uniform. He said goodbye to his family without explanation. He got into a vehicle with two officers sent from Berlin. The vehicle drove to a quiet location away from the city. Rommel did not return. The official announcement stated that he had died from injuries related to an earlier attack on his vehicle in France. The full truth of what happened was not made public until after the conflict ended. He was 52 years old. 3 German field marshals faced the same regime under Adolf Hitler. Erwin Rommel, who refused some orders and later died under state duress. Wilhelm Keitel, who signed and distributed orders without objection and later faced judgment at an international court. Albert Kesselring, who commanded in Italy and received a prison sentence. Each man made different choices. Each man faced different consequences. Rommel's record remains debated by historians because it contains both refusals and cooperation. He was neither a hero nor a monster. He was a human being making choices within an impossible system. The question that opened this narrative remains unanswered by history. Can one act of refusal balance years of service to a difficult regime under Adolf Hitler? The archives do not offer a verdict. They offer only facts. Rommel pushed back against one order. He cooperated with other directives. Both statements are true. Both statements exist in tension. That tension is the real story, not the myth of the chivalrous commander, not the myth of the committed follower, just a person making choices, living with the results of those choices. The Afrika Korps was never formally charged with violations of military law. This fact is sometimes cited by those who view Rommel positively. But the absence of formal charges does not equal a complete record. Military operations in the desert involve difficult conditions and difficult decisions. Prisoners were taken, some survived, some did not. The desert campaign was not a gentle affair, whatever some historical accounts might suggest. Military operations are never clean. The best any commander can hope for is to make them less damaging than they might otherwise be. The truth that the archives suggest is this. The November 1941 incident happened. A prisoner was spared. A directive from Berlin was not followed. But that refusal did not transform Rommel into a resistance figure opposed to Adolf Hitler. It showed that he drew a line at a particular point. He drew that line in the sand of the Libyan desert, and he did not cross it. But he continued to serve under Hitler. He continued to accept promotion. He continued to accept public recognition. And when the end came, he accepted a different outcome rather than face a public proceeding. The individual who issued the original order from Berlin remains unknown. The paper trail does not lead to a single signature, but the principle is clear. Adolf Hitler's high command decided that some soldiers did not deserve the protections offered by international agreements. And one commander in the desert said no. That no was small. It did not change the outcome of the conflict. It saved one life. But it was a no. And in a system where yes was the expected answer, a single no carries historical significance. This is a story about decisions, about the space between receiving an order and carrying it out, about what happens when a commander looks at an instruction and sees something that conflicts with professional ethics. Rommel saw a soldier, a captured soldier like many others, a person in a difficult situation, and he made a choice. It was not the choice that would satisfy those who demand moral purity. It was not the choice that would satisfy those who demand complete obedience. It was a human choice. And in the end, that may be the only kind any of us can make. If you had been in Rommel's position, facing an order that violated every code of military honor but came from the highest authority, would you have obeyed, refused quietly, or openly defied the command? What do you think his refusal actually cost him? Share your perspective in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.